Hi friends! Welcome to Organic True Crime with Sydney Hopes, where I talk about interesting true crime stories. This month I've been focusing on Prohibition mobsters, and today I'm going to be talking about the infamous Al Capone, aka Scarface. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born in 1899 in Brooklyn to Gabriel and Teresa Capone. They were both Italian immigrants, and he was actually the fourth of 9 children, and 2 of his brothers ended up working for him in Chicago, and one of them ended up running a mob in Nebraska, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, Al Capone was sent to a private Catholic school where he got into constant trouble until he was 14, and he hit one of his teachers in the face and he got expelled. Which, aren't teachers at Catholic schools nuns? Or is that just something they do on TV? Anyway, it was a female teacher that he hit in the face, and then he got expelled. And after that, he decided he didn't need to go back to school, so instead he just started doing odd jobs around the city. And it was not long before he started getting involved with local criminals in New York City. Capone was a member of several different gangs during his time in New York, and at some point he was working as a bouncer when he insulted a woman that was in line, and her brother, who was also there, heard and reacted by taking out a knife and slashing Al Capone in the face 3 times. And this is how he got the nickname Scarface, because he ended up with 3 very large scars on his face from it. And he hated the whole incident, I think he was very embarrassed by it, I'm sure, I guess. Anyway, he hated the nickname Scarface, and people that were actually close to him called him Snorky. And he was known for posing for pictures in a way that you couldn't see the scars also. Also during this time, Al Capone met a woman named May, and the two had a son together in 1918, and then they got married shortly after. And they actually had to have their parents sign something agreeing to their marriage because of how young they were at the time. And then, shortly after their marriage, Al Capone was invited to move to Chicago to work for the mob in Chicago. So during his time in New York, he made a lot of connections, and he ended up meeting a man named Johnny Torrio, who was the leader of the Chicago outfit. And he and Al Capone really got along together really well, and he ended up taking Al Capone under his wing and becoming like a mentor to him. So in 1919, Al Capone moves his whole family to Chicago. Now at this time in America, the production and sale of alcohol was illegal. So there were groups of people called bootleggers that would sell alcohol anyway, and they would use their profits to bribe local government and police so that they could continue doing what they were doing. And a group that Al Capone got involved with in Chicago did deal with bootlegging, but they also ran a prostitution organization in Chicago, and this is how Al Capone was thought to have contracted syphilis, which he famously did. But what I thought was really weird about it was that at the time, syphilis was curable and treatable, and Al Capone knew he had it like really early on, and he just chose not to do anything about it. Just thought that was odd. Anyway, shortly after joining this whole organization in Chicago, Al Capone becomes Johnny Torrio's right-hand man, and he starts running an illegal alcohol trade with Canada. In 1925, an attempt was made on Johnny Torrio's life, and the incident left Johnny Torrio with several gunshot wounds, and he did survive, but he took it as a sign and decided to retire, which made Al Capone the new leader of the Chicago outfit, and he proved to be a violent leader. Because of his position at this point, it was kind of like a Charlie Manson situation where Al Capone wasn't actually killing people, but he was the reason that a lot of people died in a short period of time in Chicago. He was responsible for bombings and shootouts and just a lot of very violent incidents ending in people losing their lives. And a lot of times it was innocent people that weren't. There were a lot of like attacks between other mobs in the area, but it was also just civilians and people that didn't want to be a part of his organization, so he bombed their business, And he was bribing local government and police so that he could just keep doing what he was doing and bombing and having shootouts in Chicago. Al Capone used intimidation and severe tactics to grow his operation, and he did really well, but all the growth led to a lot of attention on Al Capone and a lot of attempts on his life, which made him grow more and more paranoid, and he would just randomly gather everyone in his inner circle and be like, all right, we're leaving town, we're gonna travel, and not tell them how long they were gonna be gone or give them any kind of warning, because he was constantly worried that people were trying to kill him, because they were. And in 1928, he actually ended up purchasing a mansion in Florida as like his getaway home. And that brings us to 1929, when one of Al Capone's rivals, Bugs Moran, organized an attempt on Al Capone's life, and Al Capone survived and was very, very upset. So he arranged an attempt on Bugs Moran's life. And what he did was he convinced Bugs Moran that he had someone approach Bugs Moran with an unbeatable deal of a truckload of liquor. So Bugs arranged for this truckload of liquor to be delivered to one of his garages that he kept bootlegging vehicles in. But it was Al Capone's members who showed up, and 2 of them were dressed as police officers and 2 were dressed just regularly, and they went into the garage and lined up all of the men that were working there, and one of them falsely identified one of the men there as Bugs Moran, so they shot every single person there, and all 7 men ended up dying. Bugs Moran was not there, so it didn't work. They didn't get him, but because 2 of them had dressed as police, witnesses that saw a police car out front and didn't immediately go to police because they assumed that they were already responding. So that led to a delayed response, which meant that by the time police actually did arrive, 6 of the 7 men had already died, and the 7th refused to break the code and wouldn't give up any names. But Bugs Moran knew who did it. He knew it was Al Capone that arranged it, so he went to police and said that Al Capone had done it. Al Capone said he was in Florida at the time, which he was, but Bugs Moran insisted that it was still Al Capone's doing. He arranged it. So they, I guess, charged him for it and gave him a court date, and Al Capone did not show up for the first court date. He said he was sick. So they rescheduled and had a new court date, and Al Capone did not show up to that court date either because he was sick. And then that was it. Officials are just like, well, it wasn't him. He was in Florida. Let's just stop. So things like that are what makes people say that they were bribing and involved with police, because there wasn't actually any proof that in this situation he was bribing them, but they just didn't do anything about 7 people's murders because he was sick, or I don't know. At this point, Chicago was basically just being run by mobsters because they were paying off police and local government. And after the St. Valentine's Day massacre occurred, federal government decided that they had to get involved. And starting in March of 1929, Al Capone started getting arrested for things that he normally would have gotten away with, like faking sick to not show up to court dates and like carrying a gun out in public. In 1931, Al Capone was arrested for tax evasion, and he did post bail, but he was then immediately arrested for 5,000 counts of breaking prohibition laws. He originally arranged a plea deal where he would plead guilty and then he would only have to serve 2.5 years in jail. But the state refused to uphold this deal, and he ended up taking his guilty plea back and going to trial. But that did not work out for him either, and it did not take long for him to be found guilty on all accounts. He was sentenced to 11 years in jail, plus he would have to pay back all of his taxes, plus interest, and all of his court fees. Initially, he was sent to the Atlanta Penitentiary where he had to go through a medical screening, and this is where he was officially and on record diagnosed with syphilis and gonorrhea. He was also going through withdrawal from his severe cocaine addiction, and this addiction had also left him with a perforated septum, so a hole in his nose. During his time at the Atlanta Penitentiary, other inmates started saying that Al Capone was receiving special treatment and it was starting to cause some issues. So in 1934, when Alcatraz was opened off the coast of San Francisco, Al Capone was transferred there. And at this point, his health really started declining. I just can't talk anymore. His health really started declining, especially mentally, and he ended up spending his last year at Alcatraz in the hospital section. But he served his entire sentence, and then he was transferred to a different prison to serve time for different crimes he had committed. But at this point, his wife May, who was still happily married to Al Capone, so just so you know, she asked that he be released and sent home because of his poor health. And the state deemed that he was no longer a threat, and so they agreed to release him and send him home. He went to his home in Florida, where he lived until 1947, when he died at home. He had a stroke and then had serious health decline after that very quickly, and eventually passed away at home in 1947. So that's Al Capone. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I, for one, didn't know that Scarface was him. Never put that together. Anyway, I thought that one was interesting. I like learning about this kind of stuff. I hope you do too. Let me know. And I'll see you next time.